Hello. All right. I am doing this right after working a night shift, just like last week. So this is going to be fun. I have this podcast has been getting some really good numbers this week. So I feel like I really should give you guys a new episode. I have a chapter I need to write. By the end of, I have 3 days to write it. But before I dive into that, I'm going to give you guys a chapter of a different book today. Last week is the Aldon Chronicles, which is the chapter I have to write now. I'm working on chapter 7 of that. I gave you guys chapter 0. This is going to be something different. But before we start on that, welcome to 99% Geek. My name is Andrew Gatesy, and this is a book reading. 99% Geek Season 1 presents Adrift Homeless. It is a science fiction story. Basically, 99% Geek is my brand. It's I'm a writer, and I've tried everything I could to succeed at writing, and I haven't had the best of luck. So I decided to go out on my own and try to do my own thing. I have a Patreon where people can subscribe for $1 a month, and they get a chapter a month, which sounds like a raw deal maybe, but my chapters can be long. Some chapters get up to 50 pages. Usually I aim for 30 to 50 pages. The prologues can be a little shorter, so there's that. But also, you'd be supporting, if you were to just subscribe to Patreon, you would be supporting my other efforts, including this podcast, as well as I do video game streaming on Twitch as well. So there's that. I have a blog, an entertainment blog, where I review all the best television shows and rank them in a weekly ranking. I call the Geekly Dailies and the Geekly Weekly. Uh, I gotta get these tongue twisters out of the way so that I'll be ready to read. Um, so that's all things that you can find at 99geek.ca, which is my website for 99% Geek. So as I was saying, today we will be talking about Adrift Homeless. It's a science fiction story about people on a dying planet world. Dying planet world. It's one of those crazy planet worlds that we're finding in the space void. Um, yes, they are on a planet that is dying, and they need to find a new home. So they are building a ship to the stars, a giant colony ship, uh, and so we will learn more about that now. Without further ado, 99% Geek Season 1 presents Adrift Homeless Season 1 Rebirth by Andrew Gatesy. My Twitter handle at Andrew Gatesy, Geczy. Gamer tag Wing Commander 4, so you can add me to Steam or Xbox Live or anything. Text copyright. Oh my god, what are you doing, Xbox? Xbox, go to TV. Xbox, go to TV. Now do 5 lashes. Good. Alright, table of contents, spoilers. Spoilers. I'm just telling it to scroll, it's not scrolling. Don't look! Don't look! Oh my god. Oh my god, it's scrolled too far now. Yes, my mouse might be a little damaged, but I am poor and I cannot afford a new one. Okay, Act 1. The Second Rebellion. Chapter 0. A Misguided Effort. Released on patreon.com/99geek on September 30th, 2016. So I've been doing this for a while now, and pretty consistently. I've been telling my few subscribers that even if I never pick up, I'm not just going to give up and stop, because all I want to do is be a writer. It's all I've ever wanted to do in my life, and I wouldn't be happy not doing it. And I have stories that I need to tell, so I'm going to tell them whether people want to pay attention or not. I might just be yelling this into a corner by myself, but this week, no more. The numbers. There are numbers, and they are plenty. Alright, starting, before I go on any more tangents. Chapter 0, the prologue of Adrift Homeless, one of 3 books in the first act of 99% Geek Season 1. There was a shudder as their small gunship lifted off, and a computer screen in front of Tamika blinked out. It was the altitude gauge, and they were going to need it. She smacked it, and the screen sputtered to life again, The ship was already falling apart, and they had only just left the ground. She wasn't sure if the ship would hold together, and she was the one who redesigned it. You know, Tamika's darker-skinned best friend, Jack, said from the seat beside her, manual gauges don't short out. Yes, Tamika humored him, but manual gauges can't be programmed with an alternative mode upon leaving the atmosphere. The Blazkor gunships hadn't originally been designed for spaceflight. They had been used during the First Rebellion, when she was still just a young kid. They had become symbolic of Blazkor might back then, sporting two massive machine gun turrets, one above and one below, that were able to track multiple opponents at once. Hair is in my ear. Alright. Sure, the gunship had almost no maneuverability, resembling little more than a flying brick from a distance, but this brick came with two long, multi-directional turbine thrusters on either side, and was able to fly at slow but steady speeds, or hover in place to maintain fire on ground targets. There was a time a fleet of Blazkor gunships was a sight that invoked terror as they descended upon their targets without mercy, but that was a time long past, and there were no nations left to fight alongside Blazkor in this rebellion. Himalaya City, the largest nation now on the planet, was once named capital after the first rebellion cost more lives than anyone cared to remember. What followed were 2 generations of Himalaya City growing into their very own superpower, and enveloping every surrounding nation until they had successfully taken over the whole world without firing a single bullet. That was, until they came to the countries of Blazkor and Ipsil. It was Tamika's mother who led the defense, wielding fleets of the same Blazkor gunships that Tamika led a squadron of now. They tore up armies and cities, able to fly in for maximum carnage and then away before the arrival of reinforcements. But for all their victories, Ipsil still fell, and Blazkor was pushed back until they were up against a wall, a figurative wall that resembled more a large expanse of desert. Tamika, studied in both physics and engineering, had a love of guns and weapon design. She had in fact been in charge of the refit for the gunships, which included her newly redesigned railgun turrets. Not redesigned, just designed. She redesigned the gunships, she designed the railgun turrets. Before, in the Mark Is, they were fast-shooting, low-impact machine gun turrets, great for chewing up personnel but less effective against heavily armored vehicles. Her new guns worked with electromagnetically charged projectiles capable of reaching a very high level of kinetic energy. It was like the difference between dropping a rock at terminal velocity and an asteroid at speeds far faster. Sure, they fired at a slow rate, and had a far slower turning radius, but they would be far more effective where the fleet was headed. Tamika had also thickened the hull armor platings to counteract the vacuum of space, and replaced all the internal equipment with digital readouts and high-powered computer cores. And that was just the tip of the iceberg for what she'd had to accomplish in such a short time with only a crew of 20. Tamika was pretty sure she'd been responsible for an easy 80% of the 12 refitted gunships they were now launching. What else did she expect from being on the losing side of a rebellion? "You okay?" Jack asked, leaning over to put his hand on hers with concern. She supposed she must have been a little vacant behind the eyes. She squeezed his hand, and wondered if her father's skin had been as dark as his. Her mother was light brown, and Tamika landed somewhere in the middle. She'd never known her father, only short descriptions of him that her mother threw out carelessly when she was drunk. Yeah. Water break, do-do-do-do-do. Seeing Jack's worried look, she remembered how now might not be the best time to get lost in thoughts about her heritage. "You with me right now?" Jack asked her. She gave him a smile and patted him on the shoulder so he'd focus back on where he was going. After all, as pilot, the ship was in his hands. "I was just thinking about Mom's briefing," she told him, not completely lying. She could still hear her mom's voice in her head as she got out of her chair to wander the cockpit. They had no further to go. They only had one city left, on the very boundary of the deep desert, with Himalaya City forces outposted on all sides. The enemy had overwhelming odds, and still their forces did not advance. Instead, her mother had received reports from her scouts and spies that the reigning superpower was reorganizing forces into a new project. It was something in deep space, something big, and something that definitely involved the military. Spaceflight was a popular theory among scientists on Romeria, but no one had ever the funds they needed to actually make any sort of expedition beyond their atmosphere. That didn't mean Tamika didn't have ideas how it could be done, ideas she'd put into practice at her mother's order. It had been a tall order, but Tamika spent the better of a month preparing the 12 remaining gunships from a fleet of 100s, upgrading their engines and installing life support systems among uncountable improvements. Excusez-moi. Merci beaucoup. She programmed the very operating systems that controlled each and every subroutine. The fleet of ships were truly all her babies. And one of her babies wasn't flying right. She was watching the small squadron behind their ship on a computer screen from over the shoulder of one of her gunners. The ship seated 4, a pilot, a co-pilot, and 2 gunners behind on either side. The cockpit was rectangular, expanding back quite a ways and leaving a lot of room for weapons, cargo, or troops. Most of that space now was taken up by a large but very necessary fuel tank. The weapons consoles were against opposite sides, and it was over one that she... No, stop it, Xbox. Damn you. Stop listening. Go, get out of here. You're ruining my podcast. I hate you. I wish you were dead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Oh, what was I talking about again? Phenomena. The cockpit was rectangular, expanding back quite a ways and leaving a lot of room for weapons, cargo, or troops. Most of that space now was taken up by a large but very necessary fuel tank. The weapons consoles were against opposite sides, and it was over one that she leaned to spot the struggling ship in the woman's display. The right engine is burning inconsistently, she told the woman in front of her pointlessly. Dinah, Tamika was pretty sure the woman's name was. They'd gone to school together, but Dinah had never really left an impression on Tamika, and based on the woman's current expression, Mika was pretty sure Dinah had no opinion of her either. She left her old classmate's side without a word to grab the radio back at her co-pilot's chair. Black Flight 7, this is Black Flight Leader, she said into the mic. You're putting too much coolant in your right engine. It's a little sluggish, the pilot of Black Flight 7 said back. Tamika couldn't remember the names of everyone in their squadron, though it sounded like Seven's pilot was a woman. But the readout shows mixture strength at 14%. The readout must be off by like 30 degrees, Tamika insisted. You're going to have to compensate for faulty readout, I'm sorry. Jack shared another worried look with Tamika. She didn't think she'd ever seen this many worried looks from him before, and they'd known each other since childhood. We're gonna make it into space, he asked her. We gonna slap. We gonna even make it into space? He asked her, understandably. Absolutely, she lied, not nearly as confident as she was trying to let on. The desert was whooshing past as they continued to accelerate, dirt passing into a blur. They would have to reach escape velocity to leave the atmosphere, and that meant going fast. The hope was to pick up some speed, staying low through the desert. It was one airspace not under constant surveillance by Himalaya City's forces. A lot of this territory hasn't been seen by human eyes in centuries, Tamika commented to her friend. Or, in other words, Jack said, proceeding to mock Tamika, oh look, sand. There really doesn't seem to be a whole lot else here, Tamika agreed with her friend. Jack glanced over his instruments and something caught his eye. I'm picking up a reading about 10 clicks from here, he said, his hands working furiously across the panel. Oh wait, he added, it's just sand. All right, Tamika surrendered. I get it. There's nothing in the deep desert. She pulled a keyboard out from her dashboard and switched to the command prompt interface. She loaded a map of the planet and patched in the GPS data to track their progress through the deep desert. It was hard to type with the ship shuddering from the speed, the hull buffeted by the planet's heavy, dry atmosphere. At our current rate of acceleration, we're going to run out of desert in about 20 minutes, she warned Jack, pleased at least by the improved acceleration of their engines. She pulled up the diagnostics chart and double-checked that the temperature was holding at safe levels. The hard part was next. You ready to do this? Jack asked, checking the speedometer. Tamika knew why he was so excited. They were pushing the improved engines to max, and hitting almost 1,000 kilometers an hour. It was far faster than usual. Unmodified gunships generally averaged 400 kilometers an hour. 600 was the record until now. Her ships had to be installed with an improved power source for the guns, and she had the excess energy of the atomic core powering the engines. The fuel tank in the back was actually mostly filled with coolant, keeping the whole thing from blowing up. It was a desperate jury-rigging, but the times were never more desperate. If Himalayas City really had a secret weapon in space capable of wiping out an entire city with a push of a button, there was nothing anyone would be able to do to stop them. "Do it," she told Jack, signaling the OK order, to the rest of the squadron. Jack pointed the ship into the sky, and they began their ascent. The engines were still only powerful enough to get them into low Romeria orbit. After that, the atomic core would also power the plasma thrusters, secondary engines that would replace the primary ones as soon as they hit vacuum. "Remember, you have to disengage the atmospheric jets before leaving the atmosphere," she warned her friend. She would seal the primary engines not equipped to handle a vacuum, and Jack would then activate the secondary thrusters. They couldn't be turned on until the ship was safely far enough above the planet, because the excess plasma ejected by their engines burned so hot it would ignite the soup of invisible gases that made up their atmosphere. But if you waited too long before hitting the thrusters, they'd plummet back to Romeria. Their timing for each move would have to be perfect. Oh, and synchronized with 11 other pilots. Tamika was pressed hard against the back of her seat as they gained altitude, and the force of gravity pulled on each of them in turn. It was enough to push the wind from her lungs, and she grabbed at her armrest. "You okay?" Jack asked her, and she caught him glancing at her out of the corner of his eye while he fought to maintain control. The gunner Dinah called out something from the back. "Ha ha, ha ha ha. She can't choke it," Tamika's old classmate said. "She never even completed basic training." Tamika wondered if that was a dig on her post-secondary education. Dinah, like most students in Tamika's class, had gone on to military training after high school. Tamika was the only one who pursued an education in science and engineering at a foreign school. When she finally returned home, everyone had been a little different, harder and colder. The only one who seemed to hold on to any vestige of themselves was Jack. "She'll be fine," Jack said in support of Tamika. She was glad he did, too, as her breath still hadn't quite returned yet. "Mika is the strongest person I know." She could feel the blood rushing from her head, and her vision was getting woozy. But still, she reached out with everything she could to read the altitude gauge. "We're at 30 kilometers and climbing," she told Jack quietly, only starting to find her voice again with laborious effort. Okay, let me try that line again then. "We're only 30 kilometers and climbing," she told Jack quietly, only starting to find her voice again with a laborious effort. The ship shuddered from an air current, or any number of other possible factors, and Mika held the armrest of her chair tightly. It was certainly exhilarating, and on any given day Tamika enjoyed a little exhilaration. But she could even feel a slight smile form in the corner of her mouth, enjoying the challenge. But Dinah was probably right. She shouldn't have come. She wasn't qualified. She wasn't trained in military operations, and yet still her mother had put her in charge. It was her first command, and Tamika was honored for it. Her mother had never shown her so much confidence before. But who knew more about gunships now than her? If some system went wrong and malfunctioned, who else would have any hope in fixing it? Only she knew exactly what her ships were capable of. The ship shuddered again, and Tamika's stomach lurched. It occurred to her only now that if anything went wrong on this mission, chances were likely that they would all be dead before she could do much of anything. "This is just like Death Spiral," Dinah called out with a holler. "Ha ha!" Bringing the focus again to Tamika's lack of training. The Death Spiral was an infamous coaster run by the Blazkor Military Academy, known for buckling the knees of even the most hardened recruit. Their militia wasn't separated into air, sea, and land. Their soldiers were trained for any circumstance and put through an endless series of drills, even after active deployment. 50 kilometers up, she updated her crew. They would have to be close to 200 kilometers above sand level before they could even think of engaging the plasma drive. "I should have brought a book," Tamika barely heard Jack mutter, and she laughed. She couldn't possibly imagine reading a book in this kind of turbulence. Not even that picture book about the giant red mouse. She reached out her hand and Jack grabbed it, controlling the gunship with only his left. They were really going to do it. They were going to make it into space, stop the construction of an evil super weapon, and save all of man and womankind. Not too bad for a day's work, but Tamika always knew she was meant for greatness. Her mother was the leader of the only remaining rebellious force on Remeria. On top of that, she had the highest IQ of anyone born in Blazkor in over a generation. They were at 120 kilometers up now. The key would be to try and settle into a low orbit, pick up speed in a slingshot around the planet, and then break at escape velocity over Himalaya City past a large space bridge that extended from the planet's capital and into the vacuum. She nodded to Jack, and he released her hand to change their angle of ascent. I could try to guesstimate this by sight, he joked with her, but a little of that magic Mika math might help get this right. It was hard for her to think as she was shook like a martini. Stop it, Xbox. Jesus Christ. It was hard for her to think as she shook like a martini, but she appreciated that Jack was trying to distract her from a task. She did some quick math in her head, substituting in their practical altitude. Aim for 22 degrees above the horizon. You're the boss, Jack said, following her command. Dinah whispered something to the other gunner that sounded like, God save us. But Tamika ignored the woman best she could. She'd done her homework, and there was no one better qualified than her to make these calls. She couldn't let her old classmate try to drag her down. A second guess could mean life or death. The skies were as clear as could be, but there was rarely a cloud in the skies over Romeria. It didn't rain all that often. Tamika could see for kilometers in any direction, and could still look down and spot the sandy surface. It was very far down. They were nearing 300 kilometers up. This should be far enough. All right, Jack said, reaching over to a switch on the dashboard. Disengaging atmospheric jets. He pulled the throttle back with his other hand and then flipped the switch on the dashboard. Done. Now I'm gonna power on the plasma drive. I'm gonna give you a little extra power from the weapons, Tamika told her friend, making it so on her computer panel. I want to make sure the jump start holds. Now doesn't seem like the right time for performance issues. You're telling me, Jack agreed with her. He lifted the glass case back on the secondary yoke beside his seat. Grabbing it with one hand and holding the pilot stick in the other, he squeezed the trigger on the plasma drive. Tamika could feel it roar to life at their backs, pushing them into their seat again. Jack started laughing. I'm sorry, I can't not laugh like a white guy. Though it wasn't immediately apparent to Tamika why. The power on this thing, he cooed. Tamika breathed a sigh of relief. The drive has stabilized. We've got thrust. I damn it, I lost that voice. I can't believe it worked. She could hear Dinah comment from the back. Now we'll see if the guns work half as well as that just did. I assure you, Tamika said behind her at Dinah, the hard part is behind us. Guns happen to be my specialty. I have a lot more faith in them than I did us making it to this point, and frankly far more faith than I have in my gunners. Instead of worrying about if the guns will work, how about just worrying about your job? This woman was starting to get on her nerves, and she didn't even remember sharing any classes with her. There must have been at least one, but Mika couldn't think of it. Trust me, she then repeated, the hardest part is behind us. She pulled blankets from a compartment. Though you may want to wear these, she told them sheepishly. It could get a little cold in here. She handed a thick, comforter-sized quilt to Jack, who looked at it in concern before slinging it around his shoulders. How cold are we talking about here? He asked her. Don't worry about it, she insisted, passing blankets behind her. I'm sure this insulation will help a lot. All right, take a look. That's the space bridge, Jack said, pointing to something in the distance in front of them. Himalaya City, Tamika said quietly as they drew closer. It was a large metropolis with towering sandy brown skyscrapers and dusty roads. The further the buildings were from the center, the smaller they were. Even now they were flying over municipals of huts and other run-down low-income real estate properties. Won't they say yes? Dinah asked from the back, as if she'd found a hole in Tamika's plan. Or am I stepping outside my job again? They don't actively track every object this high up, Tamika explained impatiently. Even if they happen to spot us with a randomized check, we'll be long out of range before they can scramble fighters. Scene change. Scene change. That was so off rhythm. But that was 2 scene changes. All squadrons launch. John said into his headset as his fighter plane lurched into motion and launched him from the Rebirth into deep space. I repeat, Squadrons 1 and 2 are a go. The swirling nebula that surrounded their solar system was beautiful. Every time he launched, it was like a shock, a little heart attack that only got ever so slightly easier each time. He had to focus. There was no time for space gazing or taking in the beauty of their moon star up close. This is Squadron Leader, initiating roll call. 2 shows all green, a woman's voice said into the radio. It was Sarah, John's co-pilot for years. Every day the life support feeds me oxygen, okay? I'm calling it a win. 3 with no problems on my screen, a gruff voice spoke. That was Stevie Oxfray, better known as Ox. He was older, a veteran pilot from before John's time. But John knew the man could fly circles around most of the rest of them. Not him, of course, but most of the others. Not that I feel any safer. Excuse me, that was a burp. I burped. And now it's a water break. Water break, do-do-do-do-do, water break. Water break, do-do-do-do-do, water break. I don't know where it was. Not that I feel any safer. He hadn't yet adapted to their change in scenery. Flying over Remeria didn't feel quite the same in 0G. The rest of their squad went through roll call, joining in formation behind him as they did so. Our mission, he told them through the radio, is to scout multiple self-propelled unidentified flying objects on an intercept course with Project Rebirth. Sarah's voice came in through the radio. Unidentified bogies flying in space? She asked for clarification. I thought we were the ones who could do that. John immediately dismissed her confusion. Reserve judgment until we have visual confirmation, he said, figuring it just as likely to be nothing as it was to be anything. All this was new to them. None of the instruments they'd been installing on the base worked half the way they were supposed to. This was easily just a false positive. There certainly wasn't anything on his screens yet. Then again, he was stuck with a planet-based sensor that wasn't much use in the directionlessness of space. Their fighters had been modified for deep space with far stronger armor plating, and integrated life support systems that kept oxygen and temperature perfectly level. Other than that, the G-32 Endermans, named after famous engineer Thomas Enderman, had a fairly rudimentary cockpit, and that hadn't changed one bit. There were wires running through the cockpit to all the different systems of the snub fighter, and that had been like that before the modifications were ever tacked on top. The Enderman was like an atmospheric fighter that never stopped evolving. Next it would be adapted to swim in the water or some such, a most useless modification when the planet didn't have any deep bodies of water. They were orbiting the moon. The project they were set with defending was placed on the far side so that it would not be spotted in the night sky over Remeria. Not even with a telescope. They would have to get to the other side of the moon to intercept whatever it was out here in the dark with them. Maybe it's one of Dennis's boogeymen, Sarah suggested over the radio. A few weeks ago, John's 4th pilot in his squadron had insisted on seeing something moving out there during a patrol. It didn't come up on any of their sensors, local or long range. He insisted that as he approached it, it had lit up, and burst away into the swirling gases of the nebula that surrounds their solar system, immediately disappearing. It was real, Dennis insisted to them through the comms. I didn't make it up. Like when you told Ox you'd slept with me? Sarah asked him back. That was fresh out of flight school 11 years ago, Dennis insisted. Are you never going to let that one go? We all know here, Sarah continued, the only person in this squadron that comes close to meeting my standards is one. John smiled, but chose not to weigh in on the conversation. Acknowledging any attraction with anyone in his squadron would be beyond inappropriate. Let it be known I'm not a slut." Just a brown-noser, then," Ox said with a gruff laugh. Sarah's mic clicked. "You're just jealous 'cause you're fat and old." "What was that?" Ox asked, the third fighter in John's squadron, breaking formation to troll behind John's co-pilot. "Slut." "Cut the chatter, Squadron 1. John chastised them. "Ox, get back in formation. We're almost to the other side of the Moonstar." Moonstar was an affectionate name the people on Remeria had for the moon, pretty much their replacement star at night. With the swirling nebula around their planet, the moon was the closest thing to a star in their night sky. "She called me fat," Ox complained, none the less obliging his superior officer. "You're all overweight losers," John chided them gently. "Why do you keep fighting for Two's affection? None of you are in her league." "Maybe Talia," Sarah said. "What?" spoke up a feminine voice. It was 7, really 1, from Squadron 2. "Seriously," John said, needing to get his squadron in line, "the next person who breaks radio silence gets double patrols next week." "What?" Talia said through the radio again. "You don't count, 7, Sarah told Talia. "You just go on being cute." John supposed that didn't count either. "What?" John thought he spotted the unidentified bogies. He captured them on his targeting computer, which zoomed in with an external camera to give him a snapshot of the lead ship. They were definitely spacefaring crafts of some kind, but small. There was no way they could be flying Himalaya City colors. John knew intimately every ship in their fleet capable of spaceflight, and every contract on order. "Those look like Blazkor gunships to you?" Sarah asked over the comms. If it were true, he had to commend their effort. He counted about 11, maybe 12. It was still hard to see from that distance. Ox's voice rang through next. "I shot down plenty of them things in the war." The first rebellion was before John's time. "Remind me again," he asked his squadron. "What do the rebels arm those aerial gunships with?" Two 360-degree rotating .30 machine gun turrets," Ox reminded his squadron leader, "one above and one below." That was what he thought. "They have to know. Those won't penetrate our reinforced armor." There was a flash of light from one of the gunships, and the light seemed to streak across space, a brilliant, beautiful white. When it hit one of the fighters in his squadron, it went right through like a hot knife through butter, and the fighter ripped apart in a fiery, chaotic mess. John's heart dropped. That had been Six, their newest recruit. He'd only just met the kid's parents. "Fuck me," Sarah swore over the radio. Dennis's voice came through next, and he sounded panicked. Those are 30 cows, man." "Enough chatter, Squadron 1, John chastised again. "Let's show Squadron 2 why we're the best of the best. Both squadrons, break formation and evasive maneuvers." All the gunships were firing now, the first shot an obvious success for them. John's squadron broke away from him, and they all ducked and weaved through the blinding white light ahead of them. One shaft of light came straight at John, and he ducked his fighter below it. He skimmed the Enderman along the shaft of light and swung his wing at the last moment to avoid a second shaft. It was almost like a dance, his fighters all closing the distance between them and their opponents with every volley of shots. John rolled around another shot and got target lock confirmation from his targeting computer. Arming his missiles, he sandwiched his fighter between 2 shots and let the missiles fly from his wings. "Missile launch," he told his squadron, watching as the warheads streaked their way across the darkness to collide not with the ship he was aiming at, but one behind it. It erupted in a large fireball that quickly snuffed out in the vacuum of space, and, though it wasn't his target, he supposed that was good enough. They were keeping formation so tightly they were like one large target. They probably didn't have the best maneuverability, but they certainly made up for it with swiveling turrets that could strike from any angle. "We have to close the distance," John told his squadron, threading it like a needle through the web of burning white light and hitting his afterburners. "Release payloads and then activate afterburners. We'll swing past them and fly circles. Their turrets won't be able to keep up." "Payloads away?" "Oh, sorry. Payloads away." Payloads away." "Payloads away?" Sarah's voice came through. "Damn, these shots are coming in fast." The Himalaya City G-22 Endermans were coming in fast, too. Oh, I see. I forgot. I was like, why would I just repeat? But no, it makes total sense because it's a scene change. The Himalaya City G-22 Endermans were coming in fast. Tamika didn't know why. She had thought they wouldn't have any major defenses. It had been clear they were getting their materials into space through the space elevator, and she'd assumed that all they'd have for defense would be stationary turrets. They had planned the attack on the assumption of surprise, and they were equipped to hit hard and fast, then disappear before the enemy could counterattack. She'd strengthened the hull for the vacuum of space, but the tension on the metal was unimaginable. She had no way to condition test it in atmosphere, and she had a serious concern that it would buckle quickly under even light machine gun fire. "We have to keep them back!" she yelled to her gunners, though it was already proving to be difficult. The fighters were almost right on top of them. They shouldn't have gone with such a tight formation. Tactics that worked in atmosphere were different in space. She would have been better off spreading them out, but now it was much too late for that. "These turrets move too slow," Dinah complained. "They keep dodging. They're like flies I can't swat." One of the fighters roared straight over their cockpit. Jack just managed to avoid the fire of another by flying so close to that one. Dinah made a noise as she tried to swing her turret around to track the target behind them. Tamika pulled Dinah's view up on her main display. "No!" she yelled to the other woman. "Don't shoot! You'll hit one of ours!" Dinah hesitated, but cursed Tamika. "I think I'm a better shot than that." She just went from British to, well, it was more like Cockney. She went from Cockney to Texan, just like that, and I'm just gonna go with it. "I think I'm a better shot than that," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. As they argued, the fighter Dinah was tracking fired shots at the gunship behind them as it passed. The gunship tried to track the fighter and fire, but the fighter nimbly bobbed out of the way, the white streak of light searing through another gunship, and that ship imploded in a flash of fire immediately extinguished. The fighter continued to drift past the first gunship, but turned to fire on its broadside, and the first ship imploded equally spectacularly and horrifically. No, I'm not going to make sound effects. That would be absurd. "Damn it!" Tamika said, bringing up the power distribution module on her computer. "I'm cutting weapons from the main power grid and distributing everything I can to the engines." She gave Jack a meaningful look. "I'm giving you all the juice I can. Use it." "You're damned right I'm gonna," Jack said, typing into the small keypad near his pilot yoke. "Plotting the fastest trajectory around the moon." He squeezed the thruster trigger as tightly as he seemed capable, and their gunship jolted forward. "You can't do this," came a complaint from the back. She could hear Dinah undoing her seat straps, and she immediately did the same. They both rose and met in the middle of the cockpit. "You can't leave them to die," Dinah yelled at Tamika, horror painted on her face. It was turning red. "We don't leave our own behind," she insisted, looking down on Tamika. "That's one of them rules you don't get, 'cause you're not one of us." Dinah pushed Tamika into the side of the ship just as the entire gunship rocked from evasive maneuvers. "We've got one on us," Jack called behind him. "You girls want to bench this catfight till after we die?" Tamika ignored him. Maybe Dinah's face wasn't red. Maybe it was Tamika just seeing red. "What's another one of these rules?" she asked, grabbing Dinah to stabilize herself as the ship rocked again. "Always complete the mission?" She swung Dinah around and smacked her into the other side of the gunship. "How can we do that if we're dead?" Dinah jabbed Tamika across the jaw. "You're insane," she roared at Tamika. "What is one ship going to do against whatever's behind that moon?" Tamika tumbled and grabbed at her jaw. "Listen," Dinah said, punching a button on the radio. Screams came through of panic, fear, and death. "Those are our people dying out there for you. That's our entire fleet." Tamika was still rubbing her jaw, and was surprised to find Dinah offering her a hand. She didn't take it. "The mission's changed," she told the woman, giving her a sour look as she got to her feet. They were both panting furiously. I lost the other fighter, by the way," Jack interrupted them, if anyone cares. Tamika went to the radio and grabbed the mic. "This is Black Flight Leader to Squadron," she called out to her people. "Any remaining forces retreat. Try to lead their fighters toward Remeria and away from us." She wanted to say more, but nothing came to mind. "Good luck." "You can't be okay with this," Dinah said to Jack, immediately seeing to remember who she was talking to and turning instead to the other gunner. "Palau, tell her we have to go back." Tamika followed Dinah's gaze, curious what Palau thought. He turned his thin, bronzed face from one woman to the other. "I trust Suma," he said at last. Suma was her mother, "and I trust the chain of command." He nodded at Tamika, who couldn't help but smile. It was nice at least someone did. "Do what you need to do. You have my support." "And you have my support," Jack offered unnecessarily. Dinah threw her hands in the air and took her seat. Tamika sat down as well, still rubbing her aching jaw. "You said the mission's changed?" You said the mission? Jack said. "You said the mission's changed?" Jack asked her once she was again beside him. "We can't hope to carry out a seek and destroy mission on our own," she explained to Jack, working through the problem out loud. "We have to think of what's best for Blazkor. The most useful thing we can do is get a look at what they're building and report home to Mom." Tamika could feel the ship weave along with a sudden pull of gravity, and was shocked to find that they were speeding at dangerously close proximity to the moon. They had just dodged a rise in the canyon wall. "Where in the nebulous hells are we?" Tamika yelled in surprise, grabbing to her seat as they dipped under a naturally forming bridge over the canyon. Ignorance in this case had been bliss. "I did say I had to lose them," Jack told her, getting so close to the surface of the moon that their engines kicked up dust. He was skimming them along the surface, likely to keep them away from any more distractions. They passed what looked like a radar dish. "Wasn't that—" Tamika started to say, her mind spinning. "Some kind of radar dish," Jack mused, clearly coming up with similar theories of his own. Been seeing them every few kilometers, and think they might be some kind of radar net. I've done everything I can to keep us below it." Jack wasn't far off. "It's not just the moon star," Tamika expanded on his theory. She pulled up a map and tracked their trajectory, watching a replay of their external cameras to plot each radar tower on the map. "The net expands all the way to Romeria. All of deep space is in this quadrant. This is how they saw us coming." "If I'm right," Jack said, pointing to the horizon, "it should be just over that." She knew he was talking about the other side of the moon, and whatever weapon they had hidden there. Tamika prepped the external cameras again and confirmed they were still recording. "Not to jeopardize a mission or anything," Dinah said from the back seat, "but can we get gun control back, or do you still need all that power for yourself?" That was right. Tamika had pretty much forgotten that she had left the engines almost overheating. Thankfully, Jack had been going easy on the trigger, and the plasma turbines are already cooling. "I'm returning fire control," she told the two behind her. "Charge the cannons, just try not to shoot anything until I give the word." That was when she started to see it. It was tall, the top of it just peeking over the horizon as they drew in close. As it grew, it looked like a large black building rising up from the surface of the moon. It kept rising, getting higher and higher. The structure was massive, and then the bottom gave way from the horizon. Tamika realized it must have been quite a little distance away from the moon, being built in the shadow of the moonstar, safe from the prying eyes of people on Romeria. "I may not be the sciencey smart one here," Jack said, "but does that look like a weapon to you, Mika?" "No, it does not," she told him. He was right. It looked like a massive skyscraper in space, rounded in the front, with massive engines in the back. From where they were at, the thing looked like it must have been at least a quarter the size of the moon. Tamika zoomed in with the external camera and could make out massive glass panels as well as rows of machine gun turrets. The massive ship was surrounded by an equally impressively large construction frame. Hundreds of little drones and construction vehicles circled the unimaginable project, and pieces were still being fitted into place as they watched. "Can you get us out of here?" Tamika asked Jack, suddenly consciously aware of how vulnerable they were. Also how small and insignificant, but this wasn't the time for that kind of thought. "Without getting us noticed or killed?" Jack asked her. "You do remember that sensor net, right?" Of course she did. It wasn't like this was her first mission in command or anything. "I hate you," Dinah told Tamika, and her heart sank. This was the last thing she needed right now. "And you hate me." Tamika had no idea where that came from. But I have an idea, if you're willing to listen. Oh, thank the Moonstar. Oh, thank the gods and the Moonstar. All right, Tamika said, trying not to show her relief. You've got my attention. Tamika allowed herself to be led to Dinah's station. The gunner brought up on her console's main display the map of the sensor net Tamika had put together just moments ago. I was going over that map you made, Dinah told Tamika. Each radar dish on the map of the moon had lines extending from them, creating a web around the space between the moon and the planet, bouncing off similar radar towers there. The ones in blue are the ones we know about, Tamika told Dinah. The ones in green are projected locations of the rest based on the angle of the radar dishes in view and the most likely dispersal pattern that they were going for. It all sounded complicated, but Tamika hadn't figured it out on her own. She wasn't a super genius after all. The computer did most of the work. Yeah, Dinah said in a hurry. Okay, so I was looking at the map and figured. She hit a button on her console. If we take out these two towers here and here, she pointed at the screen, then, well, the towers she pointed at disappeared, and the segments of the web that they held together faded. It's a path out, Tamika said in surprise. It's a small window, Dinah admitted. Are you getting this, Jack? Tamika asked, sending Dinah's updated map data to Jack's station. After we hit the first one, they're going to know we're here. She sat back down beside him. You're going to have to plot the fastest course to the second dish, then straight up and into that hole in the web. It won't be very large, but if they don't catch us by the time we hit it, we should be invisible. The hole only goes so far. They'll see us eventually, Jack told her. But they won't be able to catch up by then, she told him, especially not if I transfer the power from weapons again. Oh, yay, Dinah moaned from her seat. Can't wait. I'll do it right after we hit the second tower, Tamika told them. The engines were really overheating last time, Jack reminded her. I don't know if they can sustain full ignition that long. We'll burn them out then, Tamika told him. We push them and get as much speed from them as we can, then drift into a Mirian atmosphere and activate the atmospheric jets. And there'll be enough to slow us down, Dinah said from the back of the gunship. Right? You can make it work, Tamika said to Jack, confident in her friend. No one could fly a large, blocky, sluggish brick quite like her friend Jack. I could probably get us through that alive, Jack admitted with a nod and then a shrug like it was no big deal. Tamika could tell he was trying to put on a brave face. They would have to make it home to tell their mother what they saw, or everything that happened today would have been for nothing. Her mother needed to know what Humanity City was building out there in the shadow of the Moonstar. She needed to know that this had all been a misguided effort. And that's the end of credits, you could say, in fact. That is the title of the chapter, so credits. That was the end of the prologue of Adrift Homeless. I hope you appreciated it as much as you have been enjoying my other audiobooks. I am not the kind of person to have preference in genre. I love all genres equally. I'm just a fan of good writing, and I'm not trying to say that my writing is the best writing or even good writing, but I am saying that that I enjoy all kinds of genres. And therefore, you're going to get some fantasy, you're going to get some sci-fi, and you're going to get some vampire stuff, which is going to be next week. Next week, we're going to get the prologue of Urban Fantasy, which is another story. This one, a sequel to Suburban Fantasy, the book we finished just a couple weeks ago. So that you can look forward to. And for Act 1, there are those three books. Those are the three books. And we'll go back and forth between the three till we get through Act 1. And then in Act 2, things get even more crazy, because then I'm going to introduce two spin-offs to Urban Fantasy. Yes, that's right. If you enjoyed the vampire series, it's getting two spin-offs that aren't about vampires, nor are they about any characters that you've met yet in the show. Though, Urban Fantasy and the Dakota Slade Paranormal Investigator just had a crossover event that I did. It's not even done yet. Just had part 1 of a 3-part crossover event. Where characters from Urban Fantasy went to the city where Dakota Slade takes place, and they were like, "Hey, what's up?" and shared some information, and then there's going to be a trade back. Or really, they went to that city in urban fantasy, and then in Dakota Slade they'll still be in that city, and they'll kind of do stuff in that book for a bit, and then it'll be back in urban fantasy. They'll be brought back by one of the characters from Dakota Slade and have a little bit of a storyline with her there. So yeah, all kinds of crossover, crazy Xanagan shenanigans. That's a new thing. And you can be a part of these Xanagan shenanigans. All you gotta do is listen here or subscribe at patreon.com/99geek, or just read my blog, really, if you really desperately don't want to pay. Or just follow me on Twitter at Andrew Gatesy, G as in George, ECZY. Andrew spelled ANDREW, for those who didn't know that. The next chapter will be called Nothing in the Deep Desert. The next chapter of Adrift Homeless, I mean. Not the next chapter of Urban Fantasy. That's you won't know what that's called until we get there. What else can I talk about? Just a reminder, you guys are being spoiled right now by me releasing on such a regular basis. It will not always be that way. I hope when that time comes, you will all forgive me and stick around and not give up. I only currently write one chapter a month, so once we catch up, certainly there will only be a chapter a month. So people have to get used to that frequency. I will I'll slow down and speed up till then, but eventually I'll catch up, and that'll be the case for that. If people were interested in reading along, certainly there are 7 chapters of this book that are already available. 300 pages worth of content. I mean, maybe 250 because there's a bunch of previews attached to that as well. But 300 pages worth of content that already exists for this book. So if you really enjoyed that first chapter, you could just read ahead and read it all. Or if you enjoyed last week's chapter, Eldon Chronicles, that also has 6 chapters. I'm working on 7 right now. That's this month's chapter. It's going to have a bit of a Valentine's Day theme. Not much of one. There's going to be love potions involved. And it won't kind of be the main focus. And it won't really be enough for me to be like, Valentine's Day, hooray! Plus, it's literally Valentine's Day right now. I almost forgot about that again. Time is difficult when you work nights, okay? If you were thinking about subscribing to 99geek and you are like, but one chapter just seems so lame, keep in mind that if you ever want me to be able to write more than one chapter a month, I need some money because I work nights 5 days a week and it's hell and not fun, and I'm poor as crap, and I've got debts that keep growing, and what I hope, the dream, is that one day I will have enough subscribers that I will be able to, I mean, quit my job would be nice. First, I would like to pay off my debts, and then quit my job, and just write full time, and then I'd be able to release, I don't know, 2-3 chapters a month. Could I do it weekly? I mean, that would be insane. I'd probably work my way up to it. I could even like do something where maybe I reach a goal of 500, and then I drop my schedule down to 4 shifts a week instead of 5. I mean, I'm already doing 5 and then 4, 5 and then 4, and so I mean I could lower it to 3 shifts a week if I get to 1,000 or something like that. I mean, the problem is escalation at this point now. There was a time where I was like, yeah, I could live off of $1,000 a month probably. But now at this point, it's probably 2,000. I would need 2,000 before I could just up and quit my day job and be like, cool, or my night job, my day-night job, and just write full time. But it would be nice. That'd be my dream. But I'm not necessarily looking for other people struggling to to starve themselves just to feed me. This is why, like, I've tried building subscription audience and it's not been working out. So that's why I've been trying, like, you know what? Screw it. I'm giving it to the masses. I'm giving all my stories to the masses. Audience is more important to me. It just is. I would rather have people paying attention and caring. That's what I want. I want people to care and actually want to look forward to what's going to happen next and be like, like have favorite characters and want to talk about their favorite characters. I want to hear it. Comment, send me messages, that kind of stuff. Do it. That would make my day. It honestly would. Send me criticism even. I'd love that too. I just love hearing people talk about my writing. I'm just very self-absorbed. Super, super self-absorbed. unimaginable. Like you've never met a guy this absorbed. It's crazy. Um, anything else? So yeah, for the next little bit, I will be writing, binging, and finishing the chapter, which should be fun and stuff. All right. So I guess I will hit the end stream button. Remember that drive safe. That's what. Damn it! I gotta stop stealing things from Kind of Funny.